there's a condition in the drone world that's called a flyaway. And so his drone did exactly that. It flew away. Thanks for having me back. I'm Randy Erie, and I'm with a drone training company by the name of Dart Drones. There's a story that comes to mind, and I'm happy to share it, and perhaps others in your viewers have seen this story as well. But about 3 years ago, there was a young man from Southern California who thought he'd take his Phantom drone to Las Vegas. The early model Phantoms were more Wi-Fi based, were certainly subject to their flight path could be hindered by a lot of electromagnetic interference. And so this young man, not believing that any of this might come to pass with his particular drone, began to fly his drone along the Las Vegas Strip. What a lovely video that would be if you could see it, of course, but highly illegal because why? That drone is operating within Class Bravo airspace, right next to McCarran Airport. So what happened is that his drone suddenly became overwhelmed with the electromagnetic interference. And so there's a condition in the drone world that's called a flyaway. And so his drone did exactly that. It flew away. And so he couldn't manipulate the drone. He couldn't terminate the propellers while it was in flight, or maybe he didn't even think to do that, but his drone started flying straight toward McCarran Airport. And that drone finally, when it flew away, it reached its critical battery level, and at that point the drone then, through a software command internally, just landed. It landed in a place not of his choosing, obviously, but that place not of his choosing happened to be on the active taxiway next to the active runway there at McCarran. And so that was called into security. They came out, and of course they collected the drone. And so can you imagine the situation? Maybe not tragic, but still a black eye for the drone industry, a black eye for drone pilots, and certainly the potential for damage had that drone hit something in that condition. So what happened is that then the FAA had the drone, and they were launching an investigation. We're going to find out the reason why this happened. We're going to find out who was in command of this drone, right? The remote pilot in command. Who was it? Because this particular gentleman, as we come to find out, got in his car and drove home to Southern California. And so as the story developed, the FAA, the drone was registered. It had a label. It had an F number, a tail number, you could call it, registered with the FAA. But the FAA soon realized that the numbers on that label were intentionally mixed up. And so the game was then afoot with the FAA, right? Realizing that there needed to be some additional work, some additional research. And so through the electronic serial number and working with the manufacturer, they were able to track this drone down to the owner, which just happened to be the remote pilot in command. Maybe they had a license, maybe they didn't. But the person manipulating the controls that day, they found them in Southern California. In the drone world, if you are in violation, you are operating a drone in a situation that requires a 107 license and you are not in possession, you do not have a 107 license, the minimum fines start at $11,000. So what happened is the FAA was investigating this particular situation, right? They had the drone, but they didn't know who the pilot was, the person manipulating the controls. Maybe the person manipulating the controls as defined by the FAA is the person who is just flying the drone using the remote controller. Were they licensed? Did they have a 107 or not? That part wasn't known at that point, but the FAA was able to determine very quickly that the label that contained the F number, a tail number, if you will, for drones, the numbers had been intentionally mixed up. It had been altered. They weren't the right number. And so the FAA at that point began, the game was afoot. They were at that point fully involved in the investigation of this particular situation. And so working with the manufacturer, in this case DJI, they were able to locate this gentleman in Southern California. Now you know that the minimum fines for operating a drone in a 107 situation without a 107 license start at $11,000. So when the FAA realized who this particular gentleman was, who the owner was, they sent a notice of proposed enforcement action to this particular guy, and he just kind of blew it off, just blew them off. And so by the time he was actually subpoenaed and hauled into court, his fine was $23,000. And so you can imagine that what was his response on that particular day when his drone was flying away? Could he have called 911? Could he have alerted? Would the traffic have halted there at McCarran Airport? Most assuredly so, till the threat was passed. But you can see how this particular drone did propose a threat, right, to any plane that was taxiing along that taxiway or perhaps taking off. There's another story, just real briefly, about it talks about, the story is about a bridegroom at his outdoor wedding reception. One evening was at that particular event was flying a drone, again another Phantom, over the outdoor reception party, and lo and behold, he flew it right into the face of one of the bridesmaids. And this was before we really had a lot of a database of history, or who pays for what in this kind of a situation. And so what happened was that bridesmaid, because her orbital bone had been smashed, her vision was disrupted in her eye, she sued him and won. Lifelong care. So now I tell this story, don't operate a drone in a situation where you should not have been operating it, and at that particular point in time, operating over people, right, was prohibited by the FAA. And the second is the need for insurance, much like flying an airplane or driving your car, just in case, because for this particular unsuspecting bridesmaid, lifelong care for that particular person flying the drone over the outdoor wedding reception. And the last story that I'll share is that as we think back a couple of years when the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds were flying in tribute to our medical personnel, and so the work that they were putting in as they were serving those with COVID, right? And so in many cities, everyone knows the story, Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels fly in formation in tribute to those personnel. There was one situation, though, as they would often basically publish their routes of flights in those particular cities. The reason that those flights actually stopped very suddenly is because someone parked a drone at that same altitude and then caught one of the Blue Angels flying by at that altitude. That person posted the video. And so once that became known to the FAA, certainly to the Navy and to the Air Force, those types of flights were halted immediately, just because, again, having a drone in a flight path, right? Just imagine the potential for tragedy had those two collided.
Hey gang, here from Hangar Talk. Thank you so much for plugging into the channel, liking, subscribing. We appreciate all you continuous subscribers, and we can't wait to see you on the next one.